All right, so let's get into it.
Okay, so today we're going to be looking at economic systems, and we're going to be breaking down different types of economic systems, starting with, in this video, the free market and how it works. So first of all, the purpose of markets. The idea that markets exist specifically comes from the fact that you have somewhere that you can have a way to obtain the things that you need. And that is because you have this idea that not one person is self-sufficient. You yourself in the market are going because you have something you cannot provide yourself, but you need a way to obtain it. So it allows for this exchange of goods to occur. So in a free market economy, you have some three key economic questions. Remember, they are what, how, and for whom. And in a free market, it's all about how do we answer these questions? So we have all of these choices made by individuals. For instance, a producer that are defined as someone who makes and provides a good and service. And then you have consumers, someone who consumes it, partakes of it, buys it. So the choices are all up to these individuals and how they're going to answer the questions. So this is what we call a circular flow model. And this is really important to see because it shows how all of this interacts. So you have the two markets here. You have a product market, which is going to be your goods. And then you have your factor market, which is going to be what goes into making the goods. So this is basically your land, labor, and your capital in that exchange. So as you can see, you have households, which is basically consumers. And you have firms, which are your producers. So the first thing is you have the households, which when we talk about the physical flow going to firms in this factor market, households are people. You are going to have, of course, labor is a big part of it, but you also have the exchange of producers going to obtain these factors of production. They might buy land in order to grow. They're going to have maybe go to a specific grower and purchase wood or, iron or ore, basically to obtain what they need to do to produce. And then they're going to provide those goods back into the market once they're finished for purchase. So you have the monetary flow in exchange. So when you have the physical factors of production being exchanged, you of course have to give money. And so firms will pay households for their labor, factors of production. In return, when you have the final goods and services produced, of course, then the households are going to purchase those goods and services. So it's kind of like, they call it a circular because it is going in a circular motion. You have this never-ending cycle of providing and paying for an exchange of goods or services or factors of production. And if you notice, it's really only two players. You have your households and you have your firms. So these are the only two players within a free market. They're making the decisions, they're making the exchanges, and there's very little interference between the two of them. So free markets really are defined by their pattern of self-regulation. So Wealth of Nations is a book that was written in the 1700s by a man named Adam Smith, who later basically becomes known as the father of economics. Adam Smith basically says that within a market, it operates the best when everything is driven by self-interest. So a firm wants to make money, so they're going to provide goods and services that the households actually want and need. And they're going to provide it at a price that they can actually purchase it at because they want to make money. If they don't sell it at the right price, nobody's going to buy it. So self-interest is what really drives that motivation and force of a free exchange in a market. And a household is driven by being able to obtain the things that they need but cannot provide themselves. And they're going to fulfill that. So this self-interest really is what drives the market. And he thinks that, and he kind of expounds upon this idea that this is all you need. People fulfilling their own self-interest to make the market run. You're going to keep prices down because producers want to sell it. And then you're going to keep prices down because really at the end, you would rather pay less for something than pay more for the same thing. So self-interest is going to drive it to regulate itself. You don't need any other kind of intervention with self-interest involved. So positive incentives, but also negative incentives can play a role. and you see this in your own life. You see positive things that drive you forward, wanting to get into colleges, getting good grades, having rewards for your things that you do. But there's also the negatives where you have like grounding, or the idea of things that consequences that can be occurred when you don't do what is being asked of you or what fulfilling your interest. The market has the same thing. Maybe currently we see tax credits for doing economically, environmentally sound kind of practices. You get tax incentives from the government. Or you could have like taxes that are negative consequences of your actions. For instance, you could be charged excise tax for things, or you can be charged higher gasoline prices for not carpooling, or of course you can be charged fines. Really, Adam Smith was driven on this positive incentive idea that is the better driver in the market for people to fulfill their self-interest, something that incentivizes them to do something rather than forces their hand a different direction. Competition is also really important. You really want to seek multiple avenues or have choice within the market. And having choice allows basically the consumer to keep the firms regulated themselves, because firms are going to want to make money. And you can't do that if you're competing with somebody else who is making a better product at a cheaper price. So firms are going to be driven by competition to appeal to the consumers. Really, in free markets, competition and incentive is the only thing that you really need. Even though there's so many advantages that we look at it for the free market, really today we cannot really define any country that exists today under a completely unregulated free market. So